Ladies and gentlemen, the liar, the witch, and the pittance in the poor box. She was a witch. She was a witch. She was undoubtedly a witch. Undoubtedly in league with the devil himself. The villagers could hear them both in the middle of the night, cackling, laughing, and revelling in their mischief deep in the deep dark woods. It would curdle their blood and freeze their spirit at one and the same time. They could hear it from their beds. They'd lock all their doors, bar the windows, pull the sheets up about their heads. It was like some great north wind, tangled up the topmost branches of their brain, and was being pecked into submission by a great ravenous raven. Who knew what vile plots they were hatching together to bring the village to its knees with one disaster or another? Those hellish raptures ripped into their very souls. Of course, nobody had ever seen a witch. Nobody had ever seen the devil, but who could deny the disasters they wrought? And they knew evil demanded its tribute if they were to have any peace at all. So every year after harvest, the villagers would parade in ritual dirge to lay half of whatever they had sown and reaped, plus their livestock, at the edge of the woods, if not to break the spell, at least appease its pernicious practices for however brief a period of peace. And within a day, all their offering had vanished, as if into thin air, not one grain of rice or poultry feather to be found. And if that wasn't proof enough, she was a very voracious witch, under Satan's spell, her mind and her belly never free of his bile. It was simply how life was, how life had been for generations and generations. To question it would only make matters worse, could possibly be the end of their world altogether. Only one villager took exception, deeply resenting having to cede half his sweated labour to service a witch and a devil nobody had ever seen. And one night he had a dream. He dreamed he was trapped in a cage, all woven over with ivy. He couldn't even find a door, never mind open it. Then suddenly one of the vine leaves sprouted a flower, and the flower blossomed into a beautiful young woman with golden hair and silver fingernails. Dressed in blue, white, and red, she held out her hand and offered him a key. But just before he could take the key, he woke up. And at that moment, he knew he had to go see this witch and devil for himself. So he set off into the deep, dark woods. He never returned. He was never seen in the village again. And if that wasn't proof enough, there was some really deep, dark mischief afoot in those woods. Best to resign oneself to one's fate. In another village, there lived a pharmacist and his wife who never stopped working. He'd be mixing up potions and dispensing medicines all day and much of the night, while his wife relentlessly scoured and scrubbed their house. They had no social life, except on Sundays. They'd go to the village chapel, drop their pittance into the poor box, then return home to feast on the finest foods and wines and sweet treats money could buy. They had one servant they'd adopted from the village poorhouse, a young boy. They meagerly domiciled in the basement, treated him very poorly, and fed him only scraps from their feastings. So he was always hungry, as his idea of heaven was a place where he would never have to be hungry ever again. Sometimes he'd sneak a pie from his mistress's pantry, but she'd always notice, and the master would give him a sound thrashing. Then one Sunday, their wedding anniversary, she prepared a special roast pig. They left the boy to watch over it while they went to church. Of course, by the time they returned, all that was left was the aroma of recently digested pork suckling. The master thrashed the boy within an inch of his life, drove him out of the house, never to return. The poor boy wandered aimlessly around till he came to the edge of a deep, dark woods where all these edibles seemed to have been cast aside, for no good reason he could think of. At first he was afraid of eating anything. Should somebody turn up and give him a sound thrashing? He salivated behind a bush and waited. Eventually, this old woman appeared out from the woods, hauling a ramshackle cart. She loaded up all the sacks of grain and baskets of fruit and vegetables, and set off back into the woods, herding the piglets, calves, and chickens along with her back to a little shack. Deep in the deepest heart of the woods, the boy followed, unseen. He watched her settle back on her haunches and pick out the rosiest, reddest apple the boy had never seen in his life. He let out an audible moan. And from that time forth, they became the best of companions. More than enough food to go round. Sometimes they'd stay up late into the midnight, chattering away around the crackling fire, laughing, sometimes dancing and singing and chattering with delight at how provident the world could be to anyone with simple happiness in their heart and enough food in their belly. They never noticed the man watching. He said nothing. He watched, then he left them in peace. He walked on through the woods, out through the other side of the woods, and he kept walking in search of a village that wasn't plagued by blinded, superstitious idiots. May as well spill sand along the edges of the carpet and jump into the ocean. But who is the liar? I cannot tell a lie, said the fly. 'Tis I just made all this up.